forewarning for everyone, I inherited my dad's art of storytelling and long-windedness a little bit, so just tuck in for a minute here. But my brothers, we're all here in the family to honor our father. I've been looking back a lot on his life and reflecting on, and just struck with the impact he's made on not only our lives, but on the lives of so many others. As any parent, he served as a teacher for me and my siblings. However, there are so many people here today that I think also experience this sort of student-teacher relationship with my father, his younger siblings, his nieces, his nephews, and the parishioners of St. Mary's. My dad was a scientist and engineer at heart and loved more than anything to try to unravel the mysteries of this world and the next one, to observe, make notes, often on note cards that he always kept handy, and then share his observations and conclusions with others. So for example, cooking with my dad was to be schooled in new ways to approach the recipe, to learn a trick of how to get the nuts chopped just right, or we'd share a new gadget he'd found or repurposed to make a complicated task simple. His house was filled with ingenious systems he designed to maximize cabinet space, reach peak drawer organization, something my dad was doing well before any of the home organization shows made it trendy, or to display just a treasured heirloom. My dad, much like myself, used rules and a pursuit of efficiency to make sense of the world, striving to always figure out the best or optimal way of doing something. So as I reflect on all he's taught me and my memories of him, I've come to view my dad's life as an ongoing quest for knowledge and for understanding. This presented itself in many ways over the years, and if you'll indulge me in a trip down memory lane, I'd like to share a few of my memories today. Perhaps some of my earliest and favorite memories of my father were of our father-daughter camping outings. The local YMCA ran father-son and father-daughter camping programs, and my dad participated in those with myself and all my siblings. Camping with my dad was certainly an experience. We all learned the proper way to fold and pack a tarp so it did not crack in storage, to assemble a tent and stake it so taut so that the rain wouldn't pool in errant folds. And we were the only ones in the group that ever camped with cots. Something that my girlfriends to this day are still in awe of. And the cooking, well, for my dad, cooking was no reason not to go all out. In fact, it was actually a reason to feast. The food always tasted better in the fresh air. And I'm sure we had many fine dinners, but what I remember most were the donut rolls for breakfast. My dad would have pre-mixed cinnamon and sugar into brown paper bags so that when you were dipping, the fresh donuts would be dipped in there. And to this day, the cinnamon sugar donuts remind me of my dad and all those years camping. But most importantly for him and for me was to instill a love of the outdoors and the brilliance of God in camping and all of us. We found those weekends so magical, and he made me promise on multiple occasions to create the same experiences with my children. And while admittedly we have yet to achieve the culinary greatness of camping with my dad, we have definitely started to take my children on short weekend trips. And while he was not physically with us on those campouts, his presence was felt, not only in my own memories, but in my son's as well. He proudly carried his magical photo chair that came with its own bag and his handle that Grandpa Russell brought for him, or snuggled warm in the sleeping bags that my dad had gotten as gifts. I'm so happy my dad taught us not only to love camping, but also to do it well. I can set up any tent and get a campsite feeling homey and organized in no time at all things I've learned from my dad. And I think the reason that my dad loved camping and the outdoors was it let you slow down and stay present. He was the type of person that didn't love a lot of distractions. He preferred to stay focused on the task at hand. He was someone who paid attention to details, who noticed the small things, and was in constant awe of the world around him. When my children were babies, he relayed a story more than once, which was his way when things really struck him, of taking my older brother to the doctor's office during his first year and noticing a growth chart on the wall that documented the many milestones that happened during that first year. First laugh, rolling over, sitting up, first step, list goes on. He was fascinated in the tiny miracles in each of those seemingly small milestones. That while every baby was on its own timeline, we all traveled the same path. He encouraged me to take note of my children's milestones, to write down the funny things they did that fascinated me, and not to take my time with them for granted. I followed his advice and also looked forward to sharing each of those small milestones with my dad. He relished his role of grandfather and took pride in all that my children accomplished. He would also take those as opportunities to share stories from my own childhood, allowing me to see my dad in a different light, not only as my dad, but as a fellow parent. It was such a joy to share those memories with him, and those conversations are perhaps one of the things I will miss most. However, I carry his joy and his fascination as I bear witness to the joy of life in the form of my own children's development and growth. But my dad was also a constant reminder that development and growth were not something limited to the young. I think the greatest period of personal growth that I witnessed in my dad came in his later life as he studied to become a deacon. He dove into those studies and opened himself up fully to the uncertainty of the unknown. I remember lively phone calls with my father during that time where he relayed some precept or lesson that he was focused on. He took so much joy and pride in his studies and truly gave himself over to the whole process. I personally think that devoting himself to service changed him for the better. Not only did it give him a higher purpose, but it exposed him to new people and new experiences. As a deacon, my dad was constantly being asked to step out of himself and his comfort zone and routine and engage in the service of others. I cannot think of a better way to constantly learn new things, for him to reshape his view of the world and continue that growth journey. I think he was aware of the seriousness of this charge and took great pride in his role as deacon in this community. I am forever grateful to all of those that supported him on that journey and gave him a place to make an impact and call home. And so when I reflect on my dad's life and my relationship with him and all he's taught me, either directly or by example, I am forever grateful for the thirst of knowledge that he has instilled in me, for the desire to engage with others in the pursuit of understanding and knowing as we navigate the trials of joy in this world. And so I want to close with one piece of advice from my dad. Those that know him well will have heard this, as he said this many, many times. I think it was perhaps his most used piece of advice for my brothers and I, at least. If you don't ask, the answer is always no. He encouraged us to be fearless in our pursuit of joy and knowledge, to realize that the far worst thing that can happen is to live with regret of not even trying. Failure is okay, and perhaps even expected, but you should always try, because the best case scenario you will be greeted with a yes. So as you leave here today, I encourage you to continue to be inspired by my dad, to learn something new, to listen openly to someone else's viewpoint, not necessarily to change your own, but to at least listen, and to fearlessly pursue your dreams and joy, to find your own yes. I can think of no better way to honor my dad.
As my siblings can confirm, conversations with my father were either very short or very long. If short, he was more or less checking to make sure we were alive. If he was in the mood to talk, it wasn't uncommon for the conversations to go an hour or more. The last long conversation I had with my father, I was in San Francisco for work. I remember it clearly, sitting in the hotel room, staring at the skyline in the dusk and the rolling hills in the distance. talked about San Francisco, his trip with my mom there years ago, the times we spent together in Jackson and Memphis, and as always, a little politics. My father often tried imparting wisdom from his life, opportunities to mirror, mistakes to avoid. The basic premises were often repeated. Work hard, be a good husband, love God. Standing here now, I cherish that conversation and the many more that came before. Neither I or anyone here will ever have one of those conversations again. Is a truth harder to internalize and understand objectively? I miss him, and his passing fills me with grief. But no one is ever truly gone. My father lives on in the memories of those who knew him and in those who loved him most. He lives on in my siblings and their own intimate conversations with him. He lives on in his own siblings who possess memories of my father that I will never know. He lives on in my mother, with whom he raised 4 beautiful children. And he lives on in this community, which he loved so much, and in which, in many ways, was the place he was always meant to be. I close with a quote made famous by my father's youth. In our sleep, pain, which cannot forget, falls drop by drop upon the heart, until, in our own despair, against our will, comes wisdom through the awful grace of God. I love you, Dad. I miss you a lot. I know you are in a better place. I look forward to seeing you again.